So recently I was asked, what is a combat maneuver? How does it work? When should I use it? I'm kind of confused on them. So today's video is going to be part one of either a 3 or 4 part series on combat maneuvers. This first one is going to be just kind of a general overview of what they are, how you calculate them, how they work in the flow of battle, what are some of the general rules that apply to them. And then the next couple of videos will focus on the individual combat maneuvers. I'll bundle like 3 combat maneuvers per video. And I haven't decided yet if I'm going to dedicate one video to grappling and sundering each because those can kind of be a little tedious and have some more minute rules that I've noticed confuse newer players. And I want to give adequate time to explain those because combat maneuvers are something that take you from average, boring sacks of hit points and just hack and slash style tactics to the more advanced, more fun, challenging, more rewarding style of play because you can do some really cool things with combat maneuvers, especially like bull rush and trip and all that, can really, really change the way of a fight. So the first thing I want to talk about is when you should use combat maneuvers. I feel like understanding what scenarios and what they kind of do will make it a little bit easier to understand how they work. So I like using combat maneuvers to kind of get an advantage on my opponents, whether I'm DMing or if I'm a player. You can do things like knock the weapon out of an opponent's hand with disarm or trip them and make them fall flat on their ass in front of you and your group of allies right in the middle of battle, or you can bull rush them onto a spike on a wall or bull rush them into a flaming furnace and sear their flesh and just do all sorts of nasty cool things with combat maneuvers. So that's kind of how I like to use them. I know it's kind of a general vague overview, but once I get more into the individual combat maneuver videos, I'll give more examples that relate more to that individual combat maneuver. So now on to the rules in the book, how I interpret them, and how combat maneuvers work mechanically in the flow of combat. In earlier editions that I've played in, particularly Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 and 3.5e, you could do these things like you could trip, disarm, sunder, grapple, but it was a very convoluted process that involved doing like opposing checks and skill checks and all sorts of different things. And it kind of got tedious. So when they made Pathfinder, they condensed it down into combat maneuvers. And every creature, character, monster, whatever you want to call it, is going to have a combat maneuver bonus and a combat maneuver defense. The bonus is your ability to perform combat maneuvers against others, and your defense, like it sounds, is your defensive ability to resist and avoid and deflect combat maneuvers targeted at you. So, calculating your combat maneuver bonus, you're going to add your base attack bonus, your strength modifier, and your size modifier. Now, typically, if you're playing with the core races or almost every other playable race outside of some more unusual ones, you're going to be a medium sized creature. So, it's going to be a 0 for your size modifier. There is a table in the rulebook, and you can also find it on the Pathfinder website. I'll link it in the description. Gives the numbers for either the bonuses or the penalties, depending on what size creature you are. All right, so performing a combat maneuver, you normally do this in place of your attack. So instead of attacking to deal damage, you will attack to trip or disarm or sunder. Now, unless you have the improved whatever you're doing, like improved trip or improved grapple or improved disarm feat, you're going to take an attack of opportunity while performing this action. And if you get hit while taking that attack of opportunity, you add the damage you take to your opponent's combat maneuver defense, which we'll get into here in a second. So getting hit while performing a combat maneuver can make it a lot harder. So if you're going to do a build that's focused on combat maneuvers, I would say pick one or two that you want to focus on and get those feats. Make sure you have those attributes in your items because there are other penalties that can come along with it. For example, when you go to trip somebody, if you fail the trip by, I believe it's 10 or more, you actually become tripped yourself. Unless you have an item that has the trip ability, like a scythe, then you can choose to just drop that item instead of falling. So you're still disarmed, but you're not on your ass in front of a giant, like, ogre. Well, just like how you have when you are making a normal attack against a person, you have your bonuses to your attack and they have their armor class that you have to try to match or exceed. That's how combat maneuvers work. You have your bonus, you're going to add that to your roll, and that has to beat their combat maneuver defense, which is calculated by adding 10 plus your base attack bonus, plus your strength modifier, plus your dex modifier, and then your size modifier. Now, if you are flanking or you have like buff spells or anything like that, those apply to their respective bonuses. So if you're flanking, you'll get that +2 to your combat maneuver bonus. You have certain buff spells that normally apply to your defensive abilities. They should still apply to your combat maneuver defense. There are some exceptions, but generally any bonuses you have from normal combat is going to apply to your combat maneuvers. So, like I said, unless you have the improved whatever you're doing feat, you're going to take an attack of opportunity. And if you take damage during that attack of opportunity, that is also added on to the opponent's combat maneuver defense, making it a lot harder for you to land that combat maneuver. All right, so now let's run through a little mock battle using these combat maneuvers, just to kind of get an example of how it works in the flow of combat, how the mechanics are applied, what roles you need to make, etc. So we're gonna have Jerry, our fighter over here, and he's gonna be fighting the almighty Gurn, the Orc Barbarian. And he would like to attempt a combat maneuver and trip Gurn. That way he can have Gurn fall down in front of him, and his allies can move around Gurn without taking attacks of opportunity. And then anytime Gurn tries to stand up, any adjacent allies of Jerry and Jerry himself will get an attack of opportunity on Gurn. And then Gurn also has to expend, and on the round Gurn would like to stand up, he has to expend a standard action to stand up. So he can either stand up and move and risk taking multiple attacks of opportunity if someone has like if someone has like combat expertise, or he can stand up and attack and he still takes the attacks of opportunity for standing up. So he's very limited in what he can do, and he's going to be punished for it no matter what. That's where combat maneuvers can really change the tide of battle, because all of a sudden you can have four people getting a free hit on Gurn, and it makes everything he's trying to do just that much harder. All right, so like I said, Jerry would like to perform a trip maneuver on Gurn. So he's going to trade his attack to do a combat maneuver in place of his normal standard attack. He's going to roll the d20 like he normally would and apply his combat maneuver bonus. Again, if you don't remember what that is, it's calculated by adding your base attack bonus, your strength modifier, and your size modifier. And there are some feats and some racial abilities that tweak the calculations, but that's on a case by case basis. So he has to beat Gurn's combat maneuver defense. And just to keep things a nice round number, we will say that Gurn has a combat maneuver defense of 20. And we will say Jerry has a combat maneuver bonus of, let's see, it would probably be reasonable for a fighter to have a combat maneuver bonus of around a +6 for the low levels. So Jerry has to roll a 14 or higher on the dice. If you tie, the tie always goes to the attacker, the one who initiates the combat maneuver. So if Jerry rolls a 14, Gurn is tripped. He doesn't get any reflex saves or anything like that. That's kind of part of the streamline process they use from going from the older versions to the newer versions, because before there would be a whole bunch of checks that needed to be made and everything like that. It's like, no, we're just going to make it one roll. So Gurn is tripped. Now, if Jerry had failed the attack by 10 or more, then he himself would have been tripped unless he had a weapon that had the trip special feature. In that case, he is allowed to drop the weapon instead of falling down. Now, one thing I forgot to mention was when Jerry rolled his attack, unless he has the improved trip feat, Gurn gets an attack of opportunity on him. And like I said before in the video, if Gurn were to hit him while Jerry is performing this trip maneuver, then that damage that Jerry takes is added to Gurn's combat maneuver defense. It makes Jerry's job of tripping Gurn a little bit harder. I hope that kind of explains combat maneuvers for you, the basic mechanics of how they work in combat, when you should kind of use them and what they are. Look out for future videos on the individual combat maneuvers, the specific ones like grapple, sunder, disarm, all that stuff. I haven't decided how I'm going to break it up yet, but it'll definitely either be 2 or 3 more videos and maybe a fourth. It depends on how long the grapple video is, because that one I see being the most confusing and I want to explain that well. Go ahead and subscribe if you're interested in more Pathfinder/Dungeons and Dragon content, maybe some more tabletop RPGs in the future. And thanks for watching and have a good day.